bridge builder and gives people the opportunity to shine. It opens doors, and the people walk through those doors and do the most extraordinary things.
For me, Toronto was the center of this incredibly vibrant place where urbanity came together with culture, the arts, diversity, and business.
And I think Toronto's best years are ahead of it. One may look back on this time and say that we were at the dawn of a new era, and let's certainly hope so.
First and foremost, he was in love with Toronto. I mean, he grew up in Sioux City, Iowa. And when he came to Toronto, he was expecting Cleveland. He didn't know what it would look like. He thought it would be more industrial, but it turned out to be this wonderful green city with a lot of optimism, and he saw possibilities everywhere. So he was invited as a speaker to what was then called the City Summit Alliance. And of course, being a great speaker with no shortage of ideas, he blew everybody away. And he said, well, you know, if you want me to speak again, I could do that. Or if you want me to be more involved, I could do that too. Then he ends up kind of taking over the show, and the rest is history.
The founding mission was to develop an action plan to address issues that came out of a summit that was held in Toronto in 2002 that David spoke at. And he was frustrated that nothing was being done about all the issues that were identified then, and wanted to put together something to tackle issues that people had never really touched or never really thought related to the health of cities before.
The essence of what Civic Action was trying to do was prosecute an agenda that they didn't feel was getting enough attention, whether it was transportation infrastructure or making it easier to immigrate to Toronto or making Toronto greener. There was a sense of, we got things done because we had a convening power that drew the relevant parties together and people got on board.
I remember when it started. I was there. It was the Toronto City Summit Alliance, and I walked in, and David Pico was speaking, talking about why he loved Toronto. He didn't know me at all, and he invited me to the summit, and I said, why? And he says, because we need you, because you bring a perspective that we don't have, and you must be at the table in order for it to be an effective table. I believe in that moment, I fell in love more with our city and with the potential and the possibility of working with civic leaders to make it better. I really believed instantly. The very essence of the early days was really a group of people coming together to say, we have aspiration for our city, and we have aspiration for those who live here, using data to understand what real problems we're solving, understanding those who are impacted most, and understanding those who can bring impact. And that convening of a very diverse group of leaders at all levels and leaders without title has been a recipe for success. There's nothing else like civic action. When you think about this increase in big, urban, complex problems, but this model of a neutral sandbox that you line with usual and unusual suspects, and you have a timeline for stuff you have to get done, because you hit Control-Alt-Delete and reset the issues you're going to work on every 4 years. There's nothing else like it.
The tone at a city summit is definitely electric. It's a lot of energy and brings everyone around the table. And I think that's really where civic action is able to spark the dialogue that creates the action.
City building takes trust, and there's nothing like being in spaces where you can take off your normal business persona and really roll up your sleeves with other leaders and figure out how are we going to solve problems creatively. Listening to each other, putting some ideas up the table, that's how you build civic muscle.
I don't know any other event in the city where you could go and potentially be at the coffee stand, standing beside the mayor, the chief of police, and a youth leader who's tackling violence in Rexdale. The diversity of the views, the diversity of the experiences in the room is so compelling. It's so awe-inspiring.
It's like the best ever family reunion, but a family that you never knew you had. And it works because it taps into the best thinking and the biggest aspirations of everybody involved. And when you put those people together, you get something that's so much bigger than the sum of the parts. I just believe in the limitless potential of Toronto and its people. You know, there's so many things, attracting new companies here, creating jobs here. We haven't even touched on Luminato, which brings the creative arts community alive in our city.
I think there's so much talent here. Why wouldn't we really work to notice and celebrate that? So energy, our personal energy, plus the energy of all of us collectively, is what we should be hopeful about. And that is what storytelling, reflection back, deep thinking, and also just frivolous fun can do for us. Exposing ideas and stories to people who might not know each other, and we're shining a big bright light on the city so the whole world can go, what the heck is happening in Toronto these days? Why do those people feel so optimistic? That's what I think Luminato is doing. That's in parallel to civic action. And we were a brainchild of the same godparents.
We have a unique opportunity in the Toronto region because of the makeup of who's here. But we are still a region where it matters who you know and who can help to open a door and who can help to vouch for you, and having those relationships among peers, but also with senior leaders who could mentor upcoming leaders makes a big difference. If you come from a community or a family that is not connected to where money and power sits, it's difficult to understand how to navigate it, to actually decode how power is distributed in the city region. And as someone, not born here, my family's not from here, the ability to feel like you belong and you're not an imposter, that is all part of the leadership journey that allows talent and energy to rise.
While much of civic action is project-focused, the investment in emerging leaders is not, and that endures.
So you take a look at convening the stakeholders, empowering a new generation of leaders, and encouraging diverse Torontonians and Canadians, which are increasingly making up the majority of our population, to take their place and sort of be an ally that paves the road forward for them. That's how I look at civic action and the impact that it has.
Through the work that we do with emerging leaders, through our Diversity Fellows program, we're really seeing these bright, young, caring leaders who want to do great things show up, learn, network, and be part of these great solutions. What's amazing is that everybody comes from different walks of life. So we have, diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and being able to see yourself in different places, different sectors, different industries, different seats of leadership is an opportunity for us to share our perspectives and to activate. It was such an unbelievable opportunity for me at that point in my career to be sitting on a board with the then-to-be mayor of the city of Toronto, or, a CEO of a major bank. These opportunities to, not just in a networking capacity, but in a problem-solving capacity, bring minds together.
When you're from a nonprofit space, getting access to folks in private and public sectors just wasn't something that was easily attainable. And that's what civic action, I think, does really well, creating the opportunity and the windows or the doors with equity-deserving populations. It gives individuals like myself access to people who not just want to do the right thing, but are actually trying to make our city better, one leader at a time.
It's easy to start on a journey, but to do that year after year, decade after decade, is really about stamina, the commitment, and the purpose of people in this city.
It's really nice to see that even 20 years after the inception, this thing is still rolling along and getting things done. There aren't many things that have that kind of endurance.
Its longevity is proof that it continues to exist for a reason. It continues to do good work and get stuff done.
I think it's all a miracle. The fact that it was conceived in the first place is miraculous, and that it's here 20 years later and flourishing and relevant and active, we should really celebrate that.
That to which we give our energy grows. And so Civic Action has had the energy of, well, thousands of people over these 20 years, and it will take the energy of thousands more people over the next 20 to meet the challenges that are coming. And make no mistake, the challenges that will be greeted in the next 2 decades are way harder.
We've had 20 years to do a lot of very good things, almost practicing. Now let's take it out for a ride.
If you care about your city and you care about where you live and you want it to continue to thrive, this is the organization to do it through.
There's future me's out there that need connections, that need opportunities, so I hope they keep going.
This organization can go many, many places because it does trigger the power of the imagination. And when people with like minds act together, we can move mountains.
You found that video as impactful as I did. It's just really amazing to see how many people have worked alongside Civic Action to make this region and this city a place that we can all be proud of, that we can all thrive in. I think Civic Action, as you've seen, has long been a place for people who really care about their city to gather. So I'm Rob McIsaac, President and CEO of Hamilton Health Sciences, and also the chair of the board of Civic Action. You might be wondering why a guy from Hamilton is speaking to you. Civic Action, if nothing else, really views this as a city region, and that we have to take a broad view of Toronto and region in order for us to come to the right solutions about what's going to continue to make this a great place. On behalf of the entire board and staff, I'm so pleased to extend a warm welcome to every single one of you and to try to set the stage for what lies ahead today. Maybe before we get into the regular program, I'll just say I think it would be appropriate for us to pause for a moment. I can't imagine that there's anyone among us who hasn't been horrified by the tragic images that have been coming across our television screens every night. I'd like to take a moment just to pause and reflect and honor the victims of the violence in Israel and Gaza that we've been observing over these past few days, to honor them and to pray and to hope for a resolution to what seems to be an escalating crisis. Okay, so thank you for that. Let me begin the day by expressing some gratitude. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the efforts of the incredible team at Civic Action, led by our CEO, Leslie Wu. Can't tell you how many hours of work are required to make an undertaking like this possible. So thank you to the whole team for getting us here today. I also want to thank the more than 200 corporate, civic, and community leaders who have generously volunteered their time to help shape and inform the agenda for today. True to form, Civic Action has not tried to do this unilaterally. We have been reaching out to a broad swath of people, all of whom are contributors to what we're about to do today. Over the past several months, through a series of consultations, they've helped us validate the magnitude and urgency of the challenges facing our region. Just as important, they've helped uncover some what we think are promising solutions, but those solutions require your collective input and expertise before they are pursued. Next, my profound thanks to our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor, BMO, our summit sponsor, TD Bank, our topic sponsors, DREAM, National Bank, and RBC, and of course, the many other organizations pictured here on the screens. Your steadfast commitment to helping us turn collaboration into action is really what has made today's summit possible. Thank you. So this was alluded to in the video, but I think as we convene here today, it's palpable that our city and region stand at a crossroads. In the 2 decades since Civic Action's inception, there has never been a more urgent need for leaders from all sectors to come together to collectively address the most pressing challenges facing us. These challenges are large, they're complex, they're intertwined. In many respects, they reflect worldwide trends, climate change, an evolving world order, the vast concentration of capital in relatively few hands. They're all manifesting as critical problems right here in our city region. You only have to walk through many of the downtowns of so much of Greater Toronto to witness the toll in human suffering. But more than what's plainly visible, so many others in our region are struggling just to achieve some measure of quality of life. And many of those people are in situations which historically would have given them a good life and a chance to get at least as far as their parents did. But that compact, which has been so much a part of our success, seems to be fading. And I think complicating all of this, we are seeing this deficit in trust. Trust in our leaders, trust in our institutions, trust in the traditional places that we look to understand the context of our world. You know, trust is really the glue that holds communities together, and without it, we're vulnerable to all manner of manipulation. You know, as the CEO of a large hospital system, I've witnessed firsthand the profound impacts that these problems have on people's lives in our community. You know, the health impacts of income inequality and homelessness are simply staggering, and if the cure for poverty was a drug, we'd be putting it in the water system because of its impacts on population health. Similarly, the trust deficit had such profound impacts on our ability to advocate for best practices during the pandemic. Unfortunately, the solutions to all these things are not readily apparent. These are wicked problems. One thing is clear, though. If we don't alter course, our city region, which has been so good to so many of us, will decline in a way that hurts all of us. And so that's exactly why we're gathered here today. I think the old admonition of the environmental movement, think globally but act locally, is very much applicable here. We are asking you to join us in reshaping the trajectory of the GTHA as we face these huge challenges. We need to steer it towards a future where prosperity rises, where everybody can live their lives with dignity, a future where trust in these key societal institutions prevails. So maybe that sounds like hyperbole, but I really don't think it is. If not this group of leaders starting today, then who and when will we do this? As leaders, we have a responsibility and a collective opportunity to initiate something really profound and positive for the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area. If we genuinely care for this region we call home, we can absolutely make a difference. We can all be change makers. It will require us to connect with each other, to openly contribute our views and experiences while listening and benefiting from the views and experiences of others. Ultimately, broad-based collaboration will be the only way we are going to get to the solutions this region needs. So it's with this sense of responsibility and opportunity and belief in our collective capacity for action that I'm urging each of you to embrace the 3 tasks we've set out for you today. First of all, we want you to connect. Today is for sure an opportunity to connect with old acquaintances, but it's also an opportunity to forge new connections. And those new connections are going to help us to unlock the synergies necessary for us to get to solutions. Second, contribute. Engage actively in the discussions today. We need you to share, even if, maybe especially if you think we're on the wrong track. And lastly, commit. While being here today is an important investment for each and every one of you, the truth is the real work really lies ahead. So consider where you can invest your time and your talent and your resources to advance the solutions we need. So if you go out into the foyer, you'll find a digital commitment wall. If you do one thing today, I hope you'll put a commitment on that wall. So hopefully that sets the stage for today. Thanks again for joining us. And we are going to start to move into the principal part of our agenda. Let's get started. I have the pleasure of introducing an incredible change maker in our Hello? Okay, I'm back. I was down, but I'm up again. So this person has dedicated much of his life to supporting individuals who are unhoused, have substance abuse challenges, mental health challenges, or people who have been diverted from the criminal justice system. Civic Action, our team members learned a great deal from him in the short time since we've known him, and we are so honored that he will provide a traditional opening to today's summit. Please join me in welcoming Makwa.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you, Miigwech. Bonjour. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce myself and express that I'm extremely nervous, and I'm hoping things go off in a good way. So I'd like to say bonjour, gichimanito, nokamis, mijomas, mishkomi kwe, gijigong, wabanong, jawanong, nigabanong, giwegno, wapshkus, mquadish nakas, makododem, ojibwedao, benesi wasis, and dunjaba. And what I said is I first offered a greeting to the Creator. And the word bonjour is a word of respect for our first teacher. And he has given us our first plant medicine, Sema. And that's what someone was going around in a beautiful basket to offer everybody as a sematai. And that sema represents our connection to Creator. So it's like a telephone line to Creator, like an instant connection to Creator. And when we, out of respect, we say, Bojo Bojo, for our first teacher, Wayna Bojo or Nana Bojo. And I also said that I acknowledge the Mother Earth and Father Sky, and I acknowledge the four directions. I also introduced myself, Wapshka Makwa, which translated to English is White Bear. I'm a member of the Bear Clan of the Ojibwe Nation from Fort William First Nations outside Thunder Bay. Its traditional name is Benesi Wassison, which is Thunderbird Nest. And I, too, had a great time with the staff at Civic Action. I was really impressed with their eagerness to achieve, to learn. And we, the other day, we made the 400 tobacco ties, so we had quite a bit of time together. I just want to say thank you. And it was a really good experience. I kind of chose a theme about coming up here to do the opening. Usually we do an opening on my altar cloth over here. You can see there's our four medicines, and we usually smudge with sage. And because of all the great advancements in technology here with smoke detectors, I had I'd chosen to use my eagle feather and water, and that's another way to invite the spirits in, to clear the place of negativity, to prepare our minds, our hearts, and our spirits to the words that are going to be spoken here today. And for me, it's quite unusual for me to use water in an opening ceremony. Water is also another one of our medicines. And usually Anishinaabe Kwe or women speak for water or handle the water. But most recently, I've learned that water, that men have a role with water. And the role men have is to feed the Mer people. This place, Mishkomi Kwe, had 7 beings, 2-legged beings that walked on Mishkomi Kwe before we got here. One of those beings was the Mer people. Another one of those beings was the giants. I think you've heard about the giants and all the shows that are around. Another was the little people. And then we have the hairy people, or people like Sasquatch, or Sabe, as his name is. So that was just a couple of the beings that were here before we were here. And what the Mer people have, their responsibility, like the men fed the Mer people, and the Mer people's responsibility was to look after the water, to keep the water clean. And I chose that as my theme today because water, before there's life, there's water. Water touches every single continent on Mishkomi Kwe, on Mother Earth. And our friend Rob, he acknowledged the conflicts that are going on across the big water. There's also other conflicts going on. And I'm hoping with this water that and our sematai, with that connection to Creator, we pray for the water. And we pray that when those water touches those other continents where there's conflict, that will help them find resolution, a solution, come together to create a solution. One of the things I'm going to be doing here today at lunchtime is taking a little sample of all the food that's available. And I'm going to put it out on what we call a spirit plate. And I'm going to put my sema there with my prayers for. I think my prayers are going to be about peace, because we all need Mishkomi Kwe to survive here. That water touches all the continents, and my hope is that all of us can offer some good intentions. I'll be offering those good intentions with that spirit plate, and I will take it to the water and put it on and let it go off. And my hope that if we all do this, that will create some type of solution, some type of peace, some type of understanding that Mishkomi Kwe is this the only place in the universe where there's life. And pray for our brothers and sisters who are suffering in those conflicts. Pray for our brothers and sisters who are out on the streets, people who are suffering with mental health issues. I'm going to leave my altar cloth out here today, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And my responsibility up here today is to introduce our guests. And can I start off with Selena Young? Just wanted to welcome her up on stage here, and I'm going to offer her some sema. Yeah, okay. Before you go. Yeah. And I'd like to invite Pamela Hart to come up. And I have, I'm offering 2 bundles of sema, one for Selena and one for Pamela. And I'd just like to welcome Pamela. And one thing, Pamela's the only one I know of the panel. And I'd just like to comment about all the good work at Native Women's Resource Center. I blame them for, that's where I learned my language. They have a great instructor there by the name of John Roy. And they had a fabulous staff member there, former staff member. Her name was Natalie Spence. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you. And the next person I'd like to welcome up is Kwe Boisno. And I'm so happy I got that right. I'd just like to say welcome. Thank you, miigwech. The last thing I'd like to offer our panel is I've made some sweetgrass tea. And there's 4 cups up on stage here. I'm just going to pour some in each one of these cups here. Just to offer you some sweetgrass tea. And why I've chosen, the sweetgrass tea is it's a medicine for our future. So we use it in a smudge. You can have a sweetgrass bath, and you can drink it as tea. So it's for the future. I'm just going to leave it here. I guess the last thing I wanted to chat a little bit, very briefly, is about the land acknowledgement. And what I'd like to say about the land acknowledgement is I've heard it a lot in openings by the city or in places. And one time I raised my hand and asked the person from the city, what does that mean? They couldn't tell me. What they did tell me is about all the process they used to derive at that land acknowledgement. But what a land acknowledgement means to our community, the small teachings I've had about it, is that it's like a guest. When a guest comes into your home, basically that's what it is. So when you offer that sema, like if I'm coming into Mohawk country, I take my sema and I offer it to the Mohawk people. I'm a guest in their territory. And people, when you invite guests into your home, people know what that's like. So I think with land acknowledgements, but what I know about land acknowledgements, it's about me as an Ojibwe person acting as a guest in the territory of the Mohawk people, an example I just brought forward. So I hope people understand that for example, what's going on in the news with Ford. Think of the Greenbelt, The Jalganosh people or non-native people think of the forest as an object. We think of it as a subject. People understand that? A subject that has the trees are alive, they have spirit, the animals that live there. So I just wanted to leave you with those little bits today, and I also want to say thank you very much for having me. Miigwech Wamapi.
Okay. Hello. Is it working?
Testing.
Test.
What did I? Wait, no. Okay. Test. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. We might be just sharing a couple mics here, but it's all good. So good morning, Miigwech Wabshka Makwa for that introduction. And I don't know if y'all saw that at the Toronto Global Forum, somebody shared that the key to economic prosperity is Indigenous women. So, on that note, I am so pleased to be here with you all today and included in a conversation with two amazing female Indigenous changemakers and leaders like Selena Young, the Director of the Indigenous Affairs Office at the City of Toronto, and Pam Hart, Executive Director of the Native Women's Resource Centre of Toronto. So, my name is Kwazance Buzzino. I am of the Bear Clan from Garden River First Nation, and I've been in the city for about 10 years, currently, or this whole time at Humber College. And today, I'm pleased to moderate the conversation as an alumni of the Diversity Fellowship Program. Woo, woo. Together, we hope to share a conversation in what we believe are meaningful actions for our Indigenous communities and purposely use a strengths-based approach. So let me tell you a little about the ladies, and then after I'll let you guys add anything I might have forgot. So we have Pam Hart, who is an Anishinaabe Kwe from the Muskrat Clan and a member of the Chippewas of Georgina Island and a mother of one. Woo. She has worked on the front line for over a decade, offering client care and support services to address issues like addiction, mental health, and violence against women, and trauma and homelessness. In her current role as the executive director, she strives to contribute to healing by creating opportunities for reconnection to culture. So welcome. Also with us, we have Selena, who is Métis from the Prairies. She has been a guest on the Anishinaabe Haudenosaunee territory in and around Toronto her whole life. Selena also has decades of experience trying to influence change in the public sector, having worked for governments in Ontario, Canada, and Scotland. She is currently the Director of Indigenous Affairs for the City of Toronto, and in her role, she strives to strengthen the city's relationship with Indigenous communities and works towards advancing truth, justice, and reconciliation. So welcome.
Before my first question, was there anything else you'd like to add or mention that I might have forgotten? All right, let's get into it. So my first question is very light and eases into the conversation. Who are you wearing?
I am often wearing some type of shirt that has a statement. I have been known to have these various shirts underneath a blazer on the floor of City Council. So today I was purposeful in wearing this sweatshirt. For those of you that can't see, it says Indigenized Spaces on it. I also am often wearing beaded bling, as I like to call it. There's an incredible amount of spirit. We heard Makwa talk about spirit. There's an incredible amount of spirit that goes into creating earrings or brooches like I'm wearing today. And that I find very empowering, especially when I'm in front of a large group of changemakers and leaders and folks doing great things in and around Toronto. And last but not least, I often have medicines. You might not see them. It might be cedar in my shoes, often Chucks. It might be some tobacco close to my heart, just to keep me grounded and remind myself of how I'm here, why I'm here, and what I've been called to do as I walk in this world.
Test. Great. So I'm not wearing anything particularly special, but given it's Friday the 13th, I went with my Wednesday Addams vibes, all black. Much like Selena mentioned, I am wearing a medicine pouch that holds our sacred medicines, but it also holds items from ceremony and other sacred materials that I have picked up along the way. I work very closely with a healer who, when different things arise in life and challenges, there are different things that come your way for protection and strength and grounding. I'm wearing copper for similar reasons. And because I work at a Native women's organization, I'm very fortunate to have an abundance of women who know how to bead. So I have great access to wonderful beadwork. And the earrings, I think, are extremely special. One, they were made by a staff from the agency, but also when I was indulging and learning about my culture and reconnecting to where my family comes from and everything sort of that comes with that, earrings were one of the first things that I felt confident to embark on that was sort of showing off where I come from, my culture, who I am as an Indigenous woman. And so I think probably all of us could agree that earrings are something that do really give you confidence, but it's sort of also represents that we are Indigenous women. And I think at one time in my life, or for sure one time in my life, that was something that I hid. And so proudly now I can wear my medicines and my beadwork.
Okay, miigwech for both of those. And then for anyone wondering, my earrings are from 91 Beads, and you can find them on Instagram.
That up.
Yeah. All right. So my second question is around leadership. There was a nation that in their language, the word for leader translated to caring. And I really agree with that translation and believe that the responsibility of Indigenous leaders and leaders, including everybody, is to take care of the people in the community. So what does leadership and city building or community development look like for you from your unique Indigenous perspective as a Métis woman and as a member of Georgina Island?
Sure. A few different thoughts. So I'm still learning how to do this, but I really think, when I think of leadership and city building, I think of 7-generation cities. So what does that mean, right? How do we plan now for the city 7 generations from us, and what do we want that to look like? Is it infused with spirit? Is it infused with kindness? Are we connected? Is the land and waters protected? Is the sacred, again, infused? There's an incredible open access book, actually, called Sacred Civics, 7th Generation Cities, Building, I think, the 7th Generation Cities. Just Google Sacred Civics and start to think about that. It's something that I'm really trying to work with folks on. How do we make that a reality? The two other things, and maybe they're linked, what does a city look like if we live, breathe, all my relations, right? You heard some of it from Mukwa talking about, right? It's not just the built form. It's not just the processes or policies, right? It's the trees. It's the things in the ground. It's the spirit, again, and you're going to hear me say that a lot, infused in everything that we do. And it's the diversity of folks coming together. And so really that living out that teaching of all my relations. And last but not least, I'd say trust. And that's not easy, and it's certainly not easy for a lot of Indigenous folks. Even as an Indigenous person working in a colonial institution, it's not easy for other Indigenous folks to trust me. So I really think in order to, have that leadership and Indigenized leadership and civic action, civic building, city building, that trust is absolutely foundational, and we really have to be intentional about how we build it.
So I think leadership for me is a weird one. I remember when my boss, when I was younger, told me that I was a leader and that I had to be mindful about my facial reactions to things, how I delivered my input, and I really pushed back on that because I thought, one, I wasn't a leader, that I was just a paid employee, and two, I didn't know how to change who I was as a person. And so to your question about where I come from and how we influence that in the work that we do, my mom was a 60s scoop. All of her siblings were taken off the res, all under the age of 5. And my uncle still lives on the plot of land in which they were taken from. And so I think every day about the history that comes before me within my family alone, and how do I eliminate all of the adverse effects from that for my family. I have a 5-year-old now, and all the families that we embark on and meet along our journeys and within this city. I'm also very mindful, as someone who worked on the front lines for over 10 years and worked for various management, that the employees that we have at Native Women's Resource Center, they are community members. They're young Indigenous women who are not immune to the barriers that Indigenous women who we serve face. They are growing and they're learning, and they're also reconnecting to their culture. So from a leadership position in the agency, I'm really trying to break down the barriers and these silos that are so colonial, and these structures that, because they're employees, they have to be a certain way within our agency. We've eliminated all of that, and we understand that they have full circle wellness that has to be developed, that they can be leaders. I tell them every day that one of you is going to take my role, and will raise you up to take it in a beautiful way. And I watch them all grow the same way that we watch our clients grow. And so I think, for me, much to what Selena's saying, it is that 7-generational goal of looking forward, but also looking backwards, honoring the history, acknowledging the traumas, eliminating them in the moment, and then building a better future through that process.
I really appreciated how you mentioned looking forward, but also looking back and bringing back all of those traditional knowledges and teachings as you move forward. So I wanted to ask, as we are Indigenous women and people who work in these non-Indigenous organizations, or Indigenous organizations, sorry, ladies, how do you build, can you speak more about how you build trust with the community?
I can start, sure. So for me, when I walked into Native Women's Resource Center, they had been without an executive director for about 6 or 8 months. The board was heavily involved, and they had about 5 staff at the time. So when I entered the agency, I had already known that the community had many conflicts with the agency, many conflicts with the staff, and trust had been broken. What was once, a healthy resource center, a reliable place to go to, that was fragmented due to, some internal changes. So when I came in, I never wanted to be the executive director that sort of sits up in their office and that is unattainable to speak to. Obviously, I have healthy boundaries and I don't bend to every person who's like, get Pam down here right now. But I don't want to be detached because this is community and I lead with community, and I have faced much of what our community members are facing. And so when I entered into the agency, I held about 4 sharing circles, consultation circles essentially, and I did them and I sat there and I listened to every different group that we broke it up to, and I asked them exactly what they wanted, what wasn't working, and where do they see this agency. I've been very honest from day one that this agency is theirs, it's communities, they drive it, they sort of are the ones that drive the programs, they demonstrate the gaps. I'm only there to support the navigation of that effort. And so I think for me, building trust with the community was meeting them where they were at and just being authentically me. I don't show up with an agenda. I don't show up to pad my resume. I show up because our women and our children deserve someone who is going to show up for them every single time. I can't do anything more or less than that, than to show up and just be honest. The 7 sacred teachings, the ceremonies is what guides all of my work and the agency's work, I would say.
Amazing. I really just want to listen to Pamela talk all morning. Right, so I'm going to echo a few things that Pamela shared. I start from this place. I think settlers and Indigenous folks that have worked in government for a long time, we need to get over ourselves. And let me just unpack that a little bit. I think really well-intentioned folks, probably all of you in this room, can often get paralyzed by inactivity because you're scared of, I've seen people that are scared to do the wrong thing, so they do nothing, right? It's really difficult to build trust with Indigenous communities if you're doing nothing. And so that's what I mean by we have to get over that fear, get over ourselves a little bit, and put ourselves in places where we can engage, where we can listen to understand, listen to eventually act, but just meeting, as Pamela said, meeting community where they're at. And that listening and asking questions, and not being afraid. Make mistakes, learn from them. I make mistakes all the time. We just have to put ourselves in places where we are trying. We're trying to build that trust. We're trying to build those relationships.
Thank you, ladies. We just want to do a time check with our peoples. Okay. All right, awesome. So I can ask you 2 more questions. Okay, so we know that the GTHA community is strong. And I'm speaking in terms of our Indigenous peoples. Toronto alone is home to upwards of 70,000 Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. 3 of those are us. At the same time, we also know that close to 90% or 63,000 people live at or below the poverty line, as cited from the Toronto Foundation stats, including almost all of us having limited access to culture and having to move from our communities. From the strength-based approach, can you share a program that you're proud of in your organization that is addressing this? And then what are some keys to that success of the programs?
Right. Maybe I'm going to touch on the stats first. Something that I think is really important for folks to understand is we have to be really careful about data related to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We don't have a history of trusting the folks that collect that data. And so therefore, statistics about us are often grossly underrepresented, including Statistics Canada. I myself only filled out the census for the first time in 2016 because when my family told governments about where we were and what we did, it didn't go well in the past. And so if you talk to the amazing elders, healers, that work in community, that work with Native women, for example, they'll tell you that Toronto has upwards of 100,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. If you go to Well Living House and some incredible Indigenous doctors that did Indigenous-led research, they updated during the pandemic, they'll tell you there's about 88,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in Toronto. So there's a lot of us. It's a very large urban Indigenous community. And so thinking of, I will say the City of Toronto, surprisingly, maybe to some, is doing some great work. Two of the things, well, maybe I'll just focus on one because I know we're tight for time. One of the really urgent needs for Indigenous folks in and around the city, it would be the same in Hamilton, is access to land and water, right? That's, we have a role to protect it, but that's also really critical spiritually for our mental health, for our holistic well-being. And it can be really difficult, even with a giant lake right there and a huge amount of green space. We saw that in the beautiful video earlier. It can be hard for us to access that space. And so the city is taking quite a few different pieces of actions in order to help remove some of those barriers so that Indigenous folks can have access. There's an incredible lodge along the Humber where an Indigenous youth organization has ceremony for families, for youth. There's a medicine garden, a sweat lodge. The City of Toronto essentially got out of the way so that that community could practice self-determination, that organization could practice self-determination and access that space. Through grants, even as we're heading into this time of austerity, we were able to get dollars during the pandemic, just last year actually. We realized in the pandemic that there's incredible urban Indigenous organizations in and around Toronto doing remarkable work. Native Women's is one of them. But there were a lot of up and coming grassroots organizations, one or two people, a lot of them trying to do this access to land and water work. So we were able to get dollars to help fund these grassroots collectives, these amazing Indigenous community members that are on the ground, whether they're in High Park, whether they're operating along the waterfront. And so again, just giving them dollars, making it a lot easier to access those grants so that they can do the great work and they can, we can create, even more incredible Indigenous organization circles, community members coming together to support one another.
I will just mention that Selena has done amazing stuff to break down barriers when it comes to Indigenous funding, and I think that's a key factor to the success of programs like ours that we offer. So, So I think for me and Native Women's, two things come to mind. One of them is our grocery support program, which used to serve 10 people a week. In the height of COVID, we were serving over 100 appointments a week. Since the unrestricted funds through COVID had ended, we now still serve about 50 a week. We obviously had to scale back because of funding, which is unfortunate, and much to the stats and the things mentioned, we're a growing population We are a hub for relocation for Indigenous women. Sometimes that's by force. Sometimes that's by choice. Sometimes that's by necessity. So we see a lot of women come down from northern communities for high-risk pregnancies. And so I think that's a really important thing to note, because as our grocery support program is extremely high in demand, things are getting worse. So while I'm very proud of what we offer through our grocery support program and the way we've designed it is in a very dignified way, there's no lineup around the block because we don't need our women being gawked at. All of these things are taken into consideration. We ensure there's school snacks because our moms are targeted differently in the school system. So we're very proud of this, but things are getting terrible. People are desperate and they need food and they can't afford it. So just throwing that plug in there, because let's be real about what's going on in our city. And the other thing that I'm extremely proud of is through the pandemic, everyone shut their doors and people were working remotely. And I really struggled with this idea that we weren't there for community. And that if someone was to show up at our door, fleeing a situation or in need of access to anything, how were we going to do this? And so much like everyone, we turned to virtual access. And we started virtual ceremonies. Our traditional healers took their time in ceremony to determine if that was the right route and how they were going to do it, and we started offering virtual ceremonies. We received backlash from the community and beyond, which was completely understandable. There was a lot of lateral violence towards staff, the agency, and our healers, but we stood our ground. I put out a public statement as to why we were offering them, and we continued to offer them. Every single ceremony had a waiting list. We reached women in the US, all across Canada, up to Nunavut, because there was zero access. And we've been here before historically where we weren't allowed to have our ceremonies, and we were not going to allow that to repeat itself because our community has a right to their ceremonies and we are in an urban environment. We've been gifted technology through, the changes of our society, and we took advantage of it. So we offered virtual ceremonies, which still happen today, and now everyone offers virtual ceremonies. So we're very proud that we stood our ground, that we were brave. I'm grateful to our healers for taking that leap and doing what was right for community.
Thank you both for all your hard work that you do for the city and the community in Toronto. I know that in my work, when I am sending students out into agencies, I feel confident sending graduates to work at the City of Toronto and then sending current learners or alumni to the Native Women's Resource Center to get support and to be active in the GTHA. So as we wrap, my last question for you both is, what are your calls to action for delegates in this room?
Okay. There's a few things. I mentioned sacred civics and thinking about seventh generation cities, right? All of you play a role in city building, and so I strongly encourage you to seek out that resource. Also, there's an incredible, somewhat related, it's 7 years old and it is still highly relevant. An incredible Haudenosaunee leader, Roberta Jameson, past lead CEO for Inspire. Probably wouldn't have been able to go through school if it wasn't for Roberta and Inspire. She did a Walrus talk 7 years ago that talks about 7 things that are needed to indigenize cities. They are still relevant and needed today, so I really encourage you to seek out that video. And last but not least, maybe I've worked in government too long, so I like to do things in threes. The third thing is, and I touched on it before, in Toronto, around Toronto, there are absolutely incredible Indigenous-led organizations like Native Women's. Seek out opportunities to be in community, to support those organizations, to listen. right? Whether it's a sharing circle, whether it's an event, whether it's a powwow organized by that, a marketplace organized by that organization, go. Be present and start to build those relationships and build that trust. That's the only thing, really, relationships, meaningful relationships is the only thing that is going to help us advance truth, justice, and reconciliation. So make the effort to meet community where they're at.
I would echo that. I think the city can't change in a good way for what is right and justified if Indigenous people aren't included and that our truth and our reality isn't fully understood. And so the way that you understand the real truth of our community is through building relationships and meaningful relationships. So, you know, it's not a one-time interaction. It's really involving yourself in understanding why agencies like mine and others exist. There's a reason why we exist. There's a history of how it started, and there's an essence and a spirit to our center. If you were to walk into it, you would feel it right away. And I think that, you know, we're still very much in this realm of truth, in truth and reconciliation. You have to understand why truth and reconciliation is a phrase right now. We have to understand the plague of missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have to understand the historical systems that took change, but they're still rooted in first contact and elimination of our communities. So how did they just rename themselves but are still causing the same harms? These are all things that we really have to understand on a deep level before meaningful change will happen in a good way. And I think if you can lean into that discomfort and sit there and find trusted partners to have those conversations with you, then I think we're on the right track to develop new pathways that break down barriers for better change for everyone. It's for my children and your children and families to come.
So thank you both for your time spent today and for your words and the words we're leaving you with. On behalf of Civic Action Diversity Fellows, as an alumni, thank you also for taking the time out of your day to join us. And now I would like to invite you, now I would like to welcome representatives from Summit's presenting sponsor, BMO, to the stage and invite you both to chill out now.
All right. It is an honor to follow the panel. Thank you. Your comments were inspiring and resonated incredibly with me. When you think about thinking 7 generations out, I love the quote, leaders take care of people in community. And Pamela, as you said, history before us informs our actions. Thank you. I'm Mona Malone, the Chief HR Officer and Head of People, Culture, and Brand at BMO, and I am super excited to be here with you this morning with my colleague, Piyush Agrawal, our Chief Risk Officer at BMO. Together, we are going to take a few moments to set context on key global megatrends and pathways to resilience. If that's not a big enough topic to start our morning. So with that, over to you, Piyush, to start.
Thank you, Mona, and good morning, everyone. In my almost 25 years since leaving India, I've adopted many cities as my home while building my career and raising my family. But I have to say, my time spent here in Toronto this past year, learning about the city's rich culture and customs from locals who exude joy and innovation has been very special. Thank you for the warm welcome to your city, your cause, and your community. I'm honored you've invited me to join the timely conversation about ways in which we can together identify the most pressing challenges in our world, talk through potential solutions, and build better, more inclusive communities. Today feels a bit somber than it might have been had we gathered a week ago. The world has changed yet again. But I suppose in the business of risk, I shouldn't be surprised. For even those of us who write playbooks that tackle the unknown for a living are right now struggling to grasp this tragedy, and our thoughts and prayers go out to all affected families. So, with world news as our backdrop, we come together today as one. We are leaders, influencers, executives, experts in the areas of affordability, polarization, and prosperity. Changemakers. And we are individuals empowered and engaged to name and address the most pressing risks facing the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. So before Mona rejoins this conversation and offers some deep perspective on potential solutions to today's macro trends, let me offer my expertise from lived experiences on three pronounced risks that touch us all: widening economic inequality, climate change, and disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence. First, on widening economic inequality. The gap of inequality just keeps getting bigger. The risk of not providing equal access for all to financial services, healthcare, housing, job opportunities, security is, in a word, unrest. The more inequality we accept, the more discontent we experience. Our role then, in the various spaces we represent, is to join this conversation and use our voices to influence and implement the development of meaningful policies designed to provide all people access to economic opportunities so that every person in every community can thrive, no matter their income or social identity. At BMO, our purpose is to boldly grow the good in business and life and to stand at the ready to improve the communities in which we live and work. My challenge to my banking colleagues and to those of us standing together here today is to never tire from seeking solutions, including private-public partnerships designed with all people in mind to help them build their best life. From a financial services perspective, this will mean more investments in programs and lending policies that help the people who are left behind, immigrants, those with disabilities, women, racial communities, single parents, people who face significant barriers to improving their financial well-being. The second, on climate change. Supporting a thriving economy, a sustainable future, and an inclusive society requires that we also understand and manage the ever-increasing risks associated with climate change that we, all of us, are seeing and feeling every day. Climate change exposes the world to both physical risks. Think of the extreme weather events such as floods, wildfires, and rising temperatures and sea levels, or transition risks like the move towards a greener, lower carbon economy. Globally, our governments and our regulators are rapidly setting expectations on the effective management of climate-related financial risks. Most financial services firms are taking an implementation approach to embed climate change considerations into our existing risk frameworks and our risk thinking. This requires them and us to update existing processes while building new capabilities to identify, assess, manage, monitor, and report on potential impacts to our clients, to our portfolios, to our communities, to our overall operations. For example, BMO has been looking at our bank's exposure to physical and transition risk, including, for example, how flooding might impact our residential and commercial real estate portfolios here in Toronto and everywhere we operate. Ultimately, climate risk is a new risk type that will take years to mature. And because tools and methodologies are still simplistic and first generation, all of us from these sectors we represent here today have to adapt and refine our approach as the impact from climate risk becomes clearer and the methods used to gather reliable data and quantify climate risks mature over time. Industry best practices will continue to evolve with changing expectations and changing requirements from our regulators, from our clients, and the expectations of our communities and shareholders. And third and finally, disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence. Given the risks and opportunities that AI as a capability can provide to humans, society, businesses, and government agencies, significant work is underway at various levels to make it fair, transparent, private, and safe. The greatest risk, perhaps, is underestimating the power of AI technology and the process orientation when combined with good old-fashioned human judgment and the opportunity to reskill human labor. I suspect you'll ask me, though, what risks do I see with the adoption of AI? And honestly, there are many. Let's start with bias and fairness. AI systems can inherit biases based on the data they are trained on, which can lead to discriminatory outcomes. And then, of course, there's privacy. AI systems can be used to gather, analyze, and misuse our personal data, which pose potential threats to privacy rights. There are security threats which can be exploited in things like cyber attacks and malware. And let's not forget the risk of unintended consequences in which there is no one to hold accountable for malfunctioning AI system decisions, especially those that lead to ethical or legal ramifications. But then let's look at it another way. What's the risk of not embracing AI? Think about competitive disadvantages in which our governments and our businesses fall behind on efficiency, on innovation, and on customer service. Or those times when AI can solve complex problems more quickly than humans ever could, and by doing so enhance our decision making, recognizing patterns than humans can beyond human biases. In the financial sector, AI is used to analyze vast amounts of data to quickly provide customer support and improve the overall experience while enhancing our anti-money laundering and fraud detection capabilities and creating efficiencies through process automation, reducing human error. What I do know is this: we're not facing a conventional set of problems, which means we need a massive dose of unconventional thinking. At every turning point in human history, new ideas and technologies have disrupted the world before it expanded the possibilities. So given that we're all facing this truly unprecedented future for the first time together, the most urgent questions we can try to answer are these. How will that thinking work, and how is it different from what we think today? Questions that I know Mona will now rejoin us to address.
Thank you, Piyush. So building pathways to resilience. So the way I see it, resilience comes from dealing with adversity and then adapting to new situations. So we hear a lot about multiple crises, but really it's just history happening, sometimes a lot of it all at once. As a business leader at Canada's first bank, a bank that's been around for over 2 centuries, we've weathered many crises, such as 2 world wars, the financial crisis, a host of conflicts, the Great Depression, pandemics, numerous recessions, floods, fires, geopolitical uncertainty, tragedy, and dislocations. And it is through looking back at this history that we can learn a lot about resilience if we analyze and reflect how institutions and individuals have adapted and innovated over the long run. So let's combine this pattern recognition with what we observe to be true today to create these pathways to resilience. For me, there are 3 capabilities or behaviors we can think about applying individually and weave into the fabric of our organizations. Be aware, be curious, and be collaborative. Aware of your context, aware of where the currents are flowing, and being aware of your own judgment and how it's being shaped and influenced. Pamela said this in the opening this morning when she said the first thing she did as a leader was take stock and look back at what was happening before she decided how she was going to lead when she took on this role. That's exactly what I'm talking about. People and institutions always have positions, perspectives, biases. We are limited by our own lived experiences, and we need to recognize them for what they are. Being aware of the landscape and adapting may seem simple, but it is not. So what gets in the way? Not recognizing our own biases, our skewed judgment, and our stress behaviors and their impact on others that can disrupt our outcomes. In our organizations, patterns of operating, inertia, routines that were once strengths now are not what's needed. So when we need the organization to zig, it wants to zag. And yes, we can use data and forecasting, but when it comes right down to it, it is a matter of human judgment. At BMO, being aware in the organizational context means building new capabilities in environmental assessment, scenario-based strategy, dynamic rebalancing of our resource allocation, and disciplined, rigorous ways of organizational learning that cause people to pause and review and reflect and learn on the actions as a result of what they've done. At BMO, examples of how we've built capabilities to respond to new threats an example is our financial crimes unit. This integrates cyber security, fraud, physical security, and crisis management, all under one umbrella. And it really helped us strengthen our capabilities to protect our customers and bank. This fusion center, or financial crimes unit as we call it, is here in Toronto at Bay and King in First Canadian Place. It is a state-of-the-art facility that operates as a central hub that unites teams around the globe. It's 7/24, 365 with follow-the-sun capabilities. It is successful because it has a unique capability to facilitate information sharing and data analysis fast. It has security teams that seamlessly collect and analyze data in an integrated way. This is a unique capability, whereas more of the industry standard is more siloed or segregated capability, which creates a lack of response time or less integrated thinking. We also partner with outside financial institutions, critical infrastructure owners, security vendors, government departments, and agencies around the globe. So this ability to bring various information together holistically in an integrated way for integrated problem solving is what really is the new capability. The second area I want to focus on is being curious. So what I mean by being curious is asking questions that people don't normally ask. Thinking with both this short and long view. I love this concept of 7 generations. You'll know how revolutionary this concept is when you just reflect on how short-term most people and decisions are wired for. Being curious seeks to shake up our organizations that are too used to groupthink. And groupthink is a universal danger for any group or organization with more than 10 people. Curiosity also means promoting diversity of people, of thought, of approach. And too often, our organizations and institutions shy away from this kind of diversity because it can be disruptive. It can be hard. Creating a balance between stability and creative disruption is a progressive approach in advancing diversity. Better decision-making involves sustained, long, short, thinking, acting ways of working and embracing diversity in all forms. Now, you don't have to travel very far to see this in action. We have two of them right here in the room, successful examples coming from Civic Action itself. The Diversity City Fellows and Civic Match programs. These are respected programs that bring together people from diverse communities to grow their networks, explore issues, and learn from each other. These two programs alone have supported over 500 leaders, and I know how much I have valued my time serving as a mentor. The third approach I wanted to touch on is be collaborative. What I'm talking about here is actively seeking out new networks and new partnerships that will nurture new perspectives and deliver more value for you personally and for your organization. Organizationally, what this looks like is looking at your value chain of delivery and your use of partnerships, outsourcing, ventures, finding new ways to get things done for both efficiency and effectiveness, leveraging the core competencies that you have and seeking out others who have other core competencies and figuring out how you work together. At the most practical level, this means developing partnerships within organizations and across organizations for better outcomes. A decent example of this is an initiative spearheaded by BMO and the United Way right here in Toronto. It's called ELIO, short for Inclusive Local Economic Opportunity. It gathers business and community leaders who work together to reduce economic disparity in their neighborhoods. A specific project is the Golden Mile in Scarborough. This project has now benefited local residents and small business owners in the Greater Golden Mile. How did they do it? They brought together 32 partners from different sectors and industries. They hired 130 local residents, generating over $500,000 in local revenue to local business owners. I love these pictures. These are women business owners that started with microfinancing, selling their products in the base of First Canadian Place over the holiday season. What I love most was the smiles on their face and the pride they felt showing me their products. This is impressive. We can replicate this. This is corporate leaders, government, and not-for-profit corporations working together with clear leadership and clear outcomes. Toronto is my city. It is a city I love, but it's a city, let's face it, that is struggling under the weight of multiple challenges. We see it with the increasing number of islands of rich and low-income neighborhoods. An economy under pressure, a population under pressure, only adds to this challenge. And yet, by international standards, we have advantages. What is absolutely essential is leadership, public, corporate, academic, and civil society. And we have this human capital. We have it here today in this room. What we need to do now is to come together and to confront in a very pragmatic way. And I believe it starts with an attitude shift and a leadership shift. And it comes down to simple things, as do often the most complicated and hardest things. Awareness, curiosity, and collaboration. And I would add that it requires courage and perseverance, the long-run thinking that is so often in short-term supply. We are all so wired for the here and now that we neglect to think generationally. For me, today is an opportunity to apply these approaches and attitudes to the challenges in front of us. Let us commit to act, because this organization is civic, of course, but it's also action. So we have to act decisively, compassionately, inclusively. And now, thank you.
Thank you, Mona and Piyush, for helping set such a broad context for today. I'm the last person to speak before we break out, so sit still for a few minutes still. Thank you so much for bringing these insights to frame the enormous scale and complexity of the challenges we face today. But if it's one thing, it's clear. I'm reassured to know that we have the capacity and the ability to overcome these challenges right in this room when we work together in partnerships that break down silos. That will be the key to a more affordable, prosperous, and inclusive tomorrow for everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Leslie Wu, and while I'm no stranger to civic action, this is my first summit as CEO of the organization. So as we prepare to move to our first breakout sessions for today, I have 3 things I have to do now. I have to do a bunch of thank yous. I want to share a couple of housekeeping things, and I will have one request of everyone. Thank you, Pam, Selena, and Quay, for reminding us that our journey towards truth and reconciliation starts absolutely with truth. And we have quite a distance still to travel. A thank you to Barry Average, who's not in the room today, but he and his fabulous team of filmmakers made all those interviews magically come together in the most beautiful piece of work in celebration of 20 years. I want to again we want to thank all our sponsors, BMO, our presenting sponsor, TD Bank, our summit sponsor, and all the organizations on the screen, countless corporate, government, charities, and community partners who stood beside us over the last 9 months to a year, and over the 20 years. We are standing here because of your continued commitment to support. I would now like to thank actually Rob McIsaac, the chair of our board, Tim Hockey, our foundation board chair, and our entire board of directors at Civic Action. Each of you have remarkably demanding jobs that you show up in spades every time. Thank you. You're all incredible champions and partners in our success. You're constantly challenging all of us to think and act bigger and always willing to help open doors. And it's through you that the Civic Action family is able to further its work. Could I ask our board members just to briefly stand so we can acknowledge them? Thank you. And to the Civic Action past chairs and board members, some of whom I know are here today. Zabine Herji is here with us. John Tory, I know, I saw him earlier. And to past CEOs of Civic Action, some of whom are here today as well. Jill Black, Julia Deans, I think Mitzi is here. If she's not here yet, she will be. I stand on your shoulders. Thank you all for your continued commitment to our mission. Please stand so we can acknowledge you wherever they are. Oh, and Peter, there's Peter. Thank you. Okay, now the housekeeping part. Please be patient with this. Can you please be respectful of everyone's time? Start and end sessions promptly. I have a background in transit. On time is very important. And it's important so that we can stay on task. If you have to excuse yourself or if you're late, just be mindful that a session is underway and enter quietly like a mouse and be mindful of others. There are video screens everywhere around the venue, and so they are there to help you wayfind during the day. And you can find condensed versions of the agenda in your delegate badges and more detailed agenda on all the documents that prepared you for today on our Summit microsite. It's pronounced Hoover. So you can access, it took me weeks to get that right, access the URL on the screens or with the QR code also printed on your delegate badge. If you have questions or concerns throughout the day, there are please go to the registration desk where you came in and ask any Civic Action member. We are wearing the bright orange lanyards in case you don't know who we are. Another note, these are difficult times, and we have designated a quiet room just through those doors to my right, beside the networking lounge. And for those of you going by that room, it's marked, but could you refrain from conversations or calls near that space to respect those who may need a moment of quiet? We know, because we know it's going to be busy around here and packed today. There is a photo booth right here on my left through the doors, and the commitment wall is also there. Please, it's fun, but it's also an opportunity to show your commitment of what you're going to advance after today. Okay, so that's the housekeeping. Now, I want to echo our Chair Rob McIsaac's earlier ask to ask each of you to actively seek opportunities to connect, contribute, and commit, and to be a change maker. I want to add my own specific request. Use today, and someone mentioned it early, to step out of your comfort zone. At an event like this, many of us use the natural tendency and temptation to only interact with the people we know, to engage in the topics and conversations that are comfortable for us, of most interest to us, or where we have the most expertise. Our ability to get out of the crises, as we've heard this morning, requires us to face them together, and that means being uncomfortable. Making new, unlikely relationships isn't always easy. Sometimes they can be even awkward. As an immigrant from Trinidad, I have my own understanding of discomfort. First it was the cold, then it was the language, the culture, and mostly it was the struggle to belong. All awkward. I missed the color, the chaos, and the community of home. But from that harsh start, decades later, I've grown up to love this place. Because it's not only the good times that brought me here, but the kindness of many, the village, that helped me through the rough times. Like many of you in this room, and like our founder, David Pico, as we saw in the video earlier, it is our love for the city, this region, and its potential that draws us together. Let us all act in the spirit of generosity to each other. Make no mistake, the city and the region we all love is in crisis. Time is not on our side. We must decide together to speed up closing the gaps on affordability, prosperity, and trust. We must believe that the solutions to these challenges do exist. We must invest the necessary time, effort, and resources to break down the barriers and address the inequities that stand in the way of us reaching our full potential. This city can be an example to others that civic-minded leadership can only be the way forward. We can't solve our challenges by working in silos, and we won't solve them if we're only looking out for our own interests. And most of all, the easy ways out are no guarantee for a sustained 7-generation solution. Let's show each other and this city region a little bit of love today. You now have 20 minutes to go and refresh. Is it 20 or 15? Oh, sorry. You now have 10 minutes to rapidly refresh your beverage, use the facilities, take a quick phone call or email, and you need to be sitting by when? 10 to 11, I'm taking all my instructions, at the latest to begin our first breakout sessions. Now, if you haven't yet signed up for a breakout, please do so on the Hoover app, or if you need help, check out registration. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for joining us for today, for your commitments. And thank you for being change makers. Let's turn a corner and own the change we need today. Off you go.